Greetings. Today I'm going to be reviewing Waiting for God by Simone Weil. This is a very incredible book. Just to briefly describe her, Simone Weil was a spiritual philosopher, mainly revolving around Christianity, but if you're not a Christian, please don't refrain from reading this just because her ideologies mainly and her spiritual insights mainly revolved around Christianity, because you can still take so much away from this. It doesn't involve Christianity. And if you are a Christian, well, then obviously this book will be great for you without anything needing to be said. She was a young woman who was born in the early 1900s, died towards the mid 1900s. She died very young. She spent her life, just studying philosophy and practicing her faith and journaling and writing about most of it. She was also a bit of a political activist. But this book, Waiting for God, this is basically just a accumulation, a collection of her journals and her writings. Most of them, if not all of them, are written to Father Perrin, I think it was, a father of a Catholic church who she was communicating with. One of the greatest things about this for me is that Simone Weil takes a very unique, somewhat unorthodox approach to being a Christian and to developing faith towards God. She could not bring herself to be part of the Catholic Church, to actually join the church, which is something I highly respect. And she said that she did not feel called to the church. She did not feel called by God to go to the church and to be a participant of the church. Yet, she still came up with some of the most incredible insights and built one of the most incredible relationships a human can build with God without the church, all on her own. She had a very personal relationship with God. There is so much you can learn from reading this book if you're somebody who's seeking to develop a relationship with God, whether that's inside Christianity or outside Christianity. It's very, very insightful, very, very impactful. She'll talk about verses and quotes from the Bible, and she'll break them down in ways that I've never seen broken down before. And it just really has you thinking about what God means, where God is on earth. She talks about the love we have for each other, how human beings care for each other. She talks about suffering like in the deepest ways a human possibly can, and what that means for your relationship with God. At the end of the book, her final journals is breaking down her prayer, and it just goes over what each part of the prayer means and how you can interpret it, or how she interpreted it. She was a very unique human being too, which is why I find her work so impactful, because she basically died because she starved herself to death, because she refused to eat more food than the people around her were eating, and the people around her were poor. So even though she had resources to live a better life, she refused to live that life. When she was a little girl, she refused to wear shoes because there were people around her who didn't have enough money to buy shoes. So that was just the kind of person she was. She kind of suffered due to her own doings, but she did it in the name of being equal to the people around her. And in that suffering, she found God. She describes a moment in her life where she actually communicated and had contact with God. And that was in one of her deepest moments of suffering and despair. And she talks about how that was, and how people, reach God through different ways. But if you're just somebody who wants to read a very unique individual perspective on Christianity, on just God, some very impactful spiritual insight and philosophy, I highly recommend this book. I felt very good reading this. It helped me develop, a stronger faith in what we call God, and helped me to think philosophically about, what it means to call something God, what it means to build a relationship with God, what it means to love other human beings and care for them, how God is inside all of that, how God is in all the tiny little nooks and crannies of the world. She talks a lot about how God is secret down here on earth. He obviously isn't here on earth, but he resides secretly in these little interactions we have with each other. He resides secretly in just the little things in life that we don't pay attention to. I'm also a moron, so I couldn't interpret half the stuff in here. It's definitely not an easy read. So please excuse me for not fully justifying some of her work. I definitely have to reread this, go through it again to fully understand some of the concepts. But I highly recommend it for Christians or non-Christians, just people who are interested in spiritual philosophy and spiritual insights. Simone Weil was an incredible writer, an incredible human being. And I enjoyed very much learning about her in the first part of this book and then actually reading her work. It was very inspiring, very insightful, and I can't recommend it enough.